Medieval daily life was a complex tapestry woven from the threads of social status, religious commitments, and the rhythms of nature. The structure of society in this era was largely defined by the feudal system, where nobles held land granted by the monarch, while peasants worked the land and monks dedicated their lives to spiritual pursuits. This script explores the typical rhythms of life for peasants, nobles, and monks, focusing on how they awoke, worked, ate, and spent their evenings, as well as the significant role that changing seasons played in shaping their daily activities. For peasants, the day often began before the first light of dawn, heralded by the crowing of the rooster. The warmth of a simple thatched cottage made of wood and mud provided a refuge from the cold night air. As the sun began to rise, peasants would rouse themselves and start their morning rituals. The women would first tend to the hearth, adding fuel to keep the fire alive while preparing a simple breakfast of porridge or stale bread soaked in water. Their awakening was accompanied by the sound of farm animals stirring, which required immediate attention to ensure the livestock was fed and healthy. Gaining a few extra moments of sleep was a luxury not afforded to those who laboured under the weight of feudal obligations. Once breakfast was finished, peasants would march out to the fields, often accompanied by children who were expected to contribute from a young age. The workday was laborious, requiring physical strength and endurance as they prepared the land for planting or tended to crops already growing. Depending on the season, activities would include ploughing, sowing seeds, or harvesting. The rhythm of their labour was dictated by the seasons: spring for planting, summer for tending and weeding, fall for harvesting, and winter for maintenance. The close bond with the land shaped their identity and their survival. As the sun began to set, signalling the end of the workday, peasants would return home, fatigue etched onto their faces. Dinner often consisted of a filling stew made from whatever was available: vegetables, grains, and, on special occasions, some meat. These evening meals were communal, fostering unity within the family. After eating, the family might share stories or participate in activities such as weaving or spinning wool in dim candlelight. Music and dancing were part of festive occasions, but for many nights, socialising took a back seat to the constant demands of life. Just as their morning started with preparation for the day ahead, their evenings laid the groundwork for future endeavours, reinforcing the cyclical nature of their existence. In stark contrast to the peasants' humble abode, the nobility awoke in grand stone castles filled with ornate furnishings. Their day often began later, around sunrise, with servants attending to their needs by stoking the fires and preparing elaborate breakfasts, including meats, pastries, and sweetened dishes. Nobles enjoyed a greater variety of food sourced from their lands and from trade. As they broke their fast, they may have discussed matters of the estate, manorial responsibilities, or political alliances, before embarking on their daily routines filled with leisure and obligation. This morning ritual highlighted their status, as the noble class had both the time and resources to contemplate broader issues beyond agricultural labour. As nobles proceeded with their day, many of them would often engage in governance-related activities, overseeing their lands and asserting their control over the serfs who worked for them. This could involve resolving disputes, attending to the economic management of their estates, or even wandering through their lands to ensure their tenants were fulfilling their obligations. Knights and vassals would regularly pay homage to their lords, marking their loyalty, which in turn allowed nobles to maintain power through a network of fealty. Social gatherings and banquets were common, showcasing wealth and reinforcing alliances through extravagant displays of food and entertainment, which served not only as leisure, but also as a means to strengthen political bonds. As night fell, that in stark contrast to a peasant's modest meal, noble families indulged in sumptuous feasts, sometimes lasting several hours. Various courses would be served, often accompanied by music, jesters, and troubadours performing tales of chivalry and heroism. After feasting, the nobility might engage in games, such as chess or dice, both of which were favoured pastimes showcasing strategy and wit. These evenings were not just a break from duty, but were also integral to social networking within the elite societal sphere. Stories exchanged around lavish tables would echo in the minds of knights and squires, shaping their aspirations and actions for the following days. Meanwhile, in the tranquil confines of monasteries, monks experienced a markedly different daily rhythm. The ringing of the bell summoned them to the dawn service long before daybreak. They awoke in austere cells devoid of luxury, where silence pervaded, often interrupted only by whispered prayers. The monks adhered to a strict schedule dictated by the liturgical calendar, beginning their days in prayer and meditation to seek divine guidance. Their mornings were dedicated to worship, reading scripture, and engaging in communal prayers, reflecting the central role of religion both in their lives and in medieval society at large. After their early morning prayers, monks would transition into their workdays, which varied widely from community to community. Some focused on the intellectual pursuits of copying and preserving manuscripts, thus playing a vital role in the retention of knowledge through the tumultuous centuries. Others tended gardens, raised livestock, or provided charitable support to the local community. A monk's day was punctuated by devotional practices, merging work with worship, as they saw each task as a form of service to God. The collective efforts of the monastic community not only benefited themselves, but also enriched the lives of nearby peasants and townsfolk, embodying the ideals of charity and communal responsibility. As evening approached, monks would again gather for prayer and reflection, drawing the day to a sacred close. Their evening meal was modest, typically consisting of bread, vegetables, and perhaps fish. Unlike the lavish banquets of the nobility, this meal reinforced their commitment to humility and simplicity. After dinner, they might engage in study or meditation, using the quiet time to deepen their understanding of scripture and their personal faith. The monk's daily life revolved around a cyclical pattern of work, prayer, and community, reflecting the belief that every day was a step closer to spiritual enlightenment. The changing seasons played a pivotal role in dictating the daily activities of all medieval individuals, from peasants to nobles to monks. For peasants, the spring heralded the crucial time for planting crops. Summer was full of toil as they worked tirelessly to care for their fields. As autumn approached, the focus shifted to harvesting, often accompanied by festivities celebrating the end of the work cycle. Winter brought cold, scarcity, and the need for preparation, reminding peasants of their reliance on the produce and labour of the warmer months. The seasons dictated not only agricultural practices, but also dictated social interactions and community celebrations, as harvest festivals were vital to their culture. Nobles also adapted their routines according to the seasons, with each season bringing its own set of tournaments, feasts, and other gatherings that would foster allegiance and display wealth. Spring might see the beginning of jousting tournaments, where knights showcased their valour, while summer often involved grand outdoor banquets in the lush gardens of castle grounds. Winter was for storytelling and planning, reflecting on the past year while hosting guests for solidarity in colder months. Celebrations were a vital aspect of ensuring loyalty among vassals and showcasing the nobility's generous spirit, often culminating in lavish balls filled with music, dance, and merriment. For monks, the seasons affected their spiritual practices as well, with different feast days and saints' observances determining their church calendar. They would celebrate harvest festivals in gratitude for bounteous crops, reinforcing community ties both within the monastery and with the surrounding village. The liturgical year provided a structure for their activities, with each season inspiring a particular type of contemplation and prayer. During the winter months, when external work slowed, monks could immerse themselves more deeply in theological studies and manuscript preservation, ensuring the continuity of knowledge across generations. In summary, medieval daily life varied widely across social classes, yet shared common themes of labour, communal life, and religious devotion. Peasants, working tirelessly in the fields, nobles engaging in governance and leisure, and monks pursuing spirituality each played an integral role in sustaining the social fabric of the Middle Ages. The ebbs and flows of the seasons deeply impacted their routines, shaping agricultural practices, social gatherings, and spiritual obligations. Understanding the intricacies of these lives gives us a glimpse into the past and highlights the diverse experiences that defined medieval society. Medieval castles stand as a monumental testament to the ingenuity and ambition of those who lived during the Middle Ages. These fortified structures not only served as the domicile of the nobility, but also functioned as centres of power and defence during a time marked by tumult and conflict. Their impenetrable walls and towering turrets evoke tales of bravery and despair, yet they also harbour secrets that have lingered through centuries. The architecture of these fortifications was designed not merely for aesthetics, but to withstand invading forces. The careful placement of arrow slits, drawbridges, and moats exemplified an era where warfare shaped everyday life. However, What transpired within these stone walls often goes unnoticed, as the lives of lords, ladies and servants unfolded in a complex tapestry of feudal hierarchy and daily struggle, adding layers to the intrigue. Hidden rooms, escape tunnels, and captivating legends have woven a narrative that continues to fascinate historians and enthusiasts alike. The construction of medieval castles was a remarkable feat of engineering, filled with strategic consideration for both defence and comfort. Often built on elevated terrains, such as hills or cliffs, they were designed to provide a panoramic view of the surrounding lands, offering an early warning system against potential threats. The outer walls, thick and fortified, were made from sturdy stones that could withstand attacks from siege engines, while features like battlements and parapets allowed defenders to launch projectiles while remaining shielded. The entrance was often protected by a drawbridge, leading to an imposing gatehouse that served as a primary barrier against intrusion. These gatehouses, complete with portcullises, were the last line of defence and showcased impressive millennia-old engineering skills in the design and manipulation of counterweights and pulleys. Inside the castles, while defensive measures dominated the exterior, the layout catered to the lavish lifestyles of the lords and ladies, featuring grand halls for feasting and gatherings, alongside extensive kitchens and living quarters. Defensive features of medieval castles were a crucial aspect of their design, reflecting the constant threat that noble families faced during the turbulent times of the Middle Ages. While the thick stone walls provided substantial protection against sieges, other features such as arrow slits and murder holes enhanced the castle's ability to resist attacks. Arrow slits, narrow openings allowing archers to shoot arrows while remaining relatively safe behind the wall, were ingeniously constructed to maximise both visibility and stealth. The murder holes, located above entrance points, allowed defenders to pour down boiling oil or drop heavy objects on attackers below. Furthermore, many castles were surrounded by moats filled with water, deterring direct assaults and providing an extra layer of difficulty for invaders attempting to breach the entrance. These multifaceted defensive features not only kept the castle inhabitants safe, but also symbolised their power and control over the land. Additionally, the strategic placement of towers and keeps helped to create a defensible stronghold, where inhabitants could retreat in case of an invasion. These architectural innovations collectively demonstrate a profound understanding of warfare and defence, solidifying the castle's role as a fortress of power. Life within the castle was layered with complexity, shaped by strict social hierarchy and the dictates of feudal society. At the top of the social ladder were the lords and ladies, who enjoyed a life filled with privileges and responsibilities. The lord of the castle was often a significant landowner, responsible for governing his estate and providing protection to serfs and vassals in exchange for loyalty. Meanwhile, the lady of the castle wielded considerable influence, often managing household affairs and engaging in diplomatic activities. However, despite their status, they faced numerous challenges, including the constant threat of rival factions and the complexities of arranged marriages to secure political alliances. Below them were knights and soldiers, whose primary role was to protect the castle and its inhabitants. The working class comprised serfs and various servants, each with designated roles ranging from farming, blacksmithing and cleaning, contributing to the daily functioning of the castle. While peasants lived outside the castle walls, the social divide was stark, and while life was relatively secure for those within, daily hardships were ever present. The kitchen, bustling with activity, and the great hall, echoing with laughter and music, created a vibrancy, illustrating the joys and struggles of noble life amidst the ever-present spectre of violence and warfare. Despite their strength and formidable designs, castles were not impervious. They held secrets within their ancient stones. As political intrigues and family feuds were commonplace, many castles became repositories of hidden rooms and escape routes that served both as sanctuaries and strategic advantages. These concealed chambers often provided refuge for lords and ladies during sieges, allowing them to evade capture during the most terrifying of conflicts. Escape tunnels, cleverly designed to lead away from the castle or to nearby safe havens, allowed for discreet exits during dangerous times, often marked only by the tiniest of entrances. However, beyond the practical purpose, legend surrounded these hidden features, intertwining history and myth. Tales of ghostly apparitions, trapped lovers, and forgotten treasures have become entangled with the very fabric of castle lore, tempting adventurers and historians alike to delve deeper into the past. These stories resonate with a sense of adventure and mystery, inviting us to reflect on the precarious lives of those who once lived within these walls. As we explore these secrets, we uncover not just the architectural marvels or the hierarchical lives of the castle inhabitants, but also the lingering mysteries that invite our imagination to roam through the annals of history. In conclusion, the study of medieval castles offers a vivid glimpse into a dominant feature of the Middle Ages, an era characterised by both grandeur and strife. From their impressive construction driven by military necessity to the structured life within their walls, castles represent a fascinating intersection of history, architecture, and human experience. The defensive features highlight the ingenuity and resilience of those who built them, while the secrets they hold continue to inspire tales of adventure and intrigue. The legacy of these wooden palisades turned stone fortresses remains ingrained in our collective consciousness, as we strive to unravel the mysteries within while understanding the lives of those who navigated the turbulent waters of feudal society. Castles, with their rich histories and enduring myths, serve as a reminder of the human spirit's quest for safety, power, and legacy. The knights of medieval Europe were a unique social class, distinguished not only by their martial skills but also by their adherence to a code of chivalry. This code, rooted in the ideals of honour, bravery, and loyalty, shaped the knights' conduct in warfare and society alike. While often romanticised in literature and popular culture, chivalry also served as a practical guide for knights navigating a world filled with violence, political intrigue, and evolving social norms. The term chivalry itself originally derived from the French word chevalier, which means horseman. Knights were not only warriors, but also mounted soldiers, and early codes began to emphasise virtues such as courage in battle and protection of the weak. Through countless battles, tournaments, and quests, the concept would evolve, incorporating themes of courtly love and the ideal gentleman. The code of chivalry was not a single formalised set of laws, but rather a collection of ideals and expectations that varied by region and era. Elements of the code typically included loyalty to one's lord, bravery in the face of danger, protection of the weak, and a sense of justice. Knights were expected to be exemplars of these virtues, showcasing their piety, honour, and valour not just on the battlefield, but in their interactions with others. The rise of romantic literature in the late Middle Ages further influenced this ethos, adding an element of courtly love that elevated the knightly ideal to include respect and admiration for women. In this context, chivalry became synonymous with noble conduct, extending beyond martial prowess to encompass ethical relationships and societal responsibilities. However, while the ideals of chivalry were lofty, the reality was often much harsher. Many accounts from the time reveal a more chaotic and brutal reality where knights could be as ruthless as they were noble. Feudal conflicts and power struggles often brought about betrayal and cruelty, leading to the tarnishing of the knightly image. The expectation of adhering to chivalric ideals was not always met in practice, as various historical figures demonstrating a stark contrast between the ideals of chivalry and their own actions. Wars were fought not only out of duty to a lord, but also for personal gain, glory, or revenge. This dissonance between the expected virtues and the brutal realities of medieval life illustrated the complexity of the knight's role in society, and served as a fertile ground for critical reflection on what it truly meant to embody chivalric values. Despite its contradictions, the legacy of chivalry endures today as a cultural touchstone that informs modern notions of honour and ethical behaviour. The knightly code laid the foundation for many societal norms regarding respect, justice, and the treatment of others, particularly women. In contemporary discussions of honour and virtue, the term chivalry often evokes ideals far removed from the harsh realities of the Middle Ages, yet it also serves as a reminder of a time when individuals strived to achieve moral excellence amidst a turbulent backdrop of conflict and fealty. This complexity enriches our understanding of the knights and their code of chivalry, prompting us to question the disparity between idealistic principles and the human condition in all its imperfections. The path to knighthood in the Middle Ages was a rigorous and multifaceted journey that began in childhood. Typically, a boy of noble birth would be sent to another noble's household around the age of 7 to serve as a page. The role of the page involved a mix of duties, including attending to the lord and lady of the house, as well as engaging in education and training. This formative experience was crucial, as it offered young boys a glimpse into the responsibilities and conduct expected of a knight while allowing them to develop skills in horsemanship, swordplay and court etiquette. During this period, pages also learned the importance of loyalty and service, critical elements of the chivalric code. The education of a page was not solely focused on martial skills, it also encompassed the moral and ethical teachings that would shape them into honourable knights. As pages grew older, typically around the age of 14, they transitioned into the role of a squire. This position carried greater responsibilities and required more direct involvement in the life of a knight. Squires served knights, accompanied them into battle, and were granted opportunities for more advanced training in arms and horsemanship. The relationship between a knight and his squire was deeply personal and integral to the development of the latter's identity, setting a foundation for the squire to learn from a more experienced warrior. During this time, a squire would practice specific tactics, partake in mock battles, and learn the practicalities of warfare, which were as crucial as adherence to the chivalric code. The formal ceremony of becoming a knight, known as the dubbing, marked the conclusion of this rigorous training process. The event was often a grand occasion, attended by fellow knights, lords, and family members. Different regions had varying customs when it came to dubbing, but key components included the presentation of armour and a symbolic tap on the shoulder with a sword, signalling the initiation into knighthood. The new knight would often take an oath, pledging to uphold the virtues of chivalry, loyalty, courage, and protection of the weak. This oath conferred not only title and status, but also a set of moral obligations that the newly minted knight was expected to honour throughout his life. The pomp and ceremony underscored the social significance of knighthood, and reinforced the bond between the knight and the ideals he was now bound to serve. In summary, the process of becoming a knight was more than just a military initiation. It was a transformative journey that involved education, apprenticeship, and the internalisation of chivalric ideals. Pages and squires spent years honing their skills, learning valuable life lessons under the guidance of their mentors, and preparing to navigate the intricate social fabric of medieval society. The dubbing ceremony underscored the importance of this transformation, marking the transition from a boy to a man of honour who was entrusted to uphold the noble virtues that characterised the knightly class. While the process was exclusive to the nobility, it left a profound impact on the collective cultural memory of chivalry, contributing to the enduring legacy of knights in Western history. The image of knights clad in gleaming armour, brandishing formidable weapons, is a staple of medieval lore and popular culture, yet the reality of these armaments was far more complex. Early medieval knights wore chainmail, a flexible yet protective fabric made of interlinked metal rings that provided excellent defence against slashes. Chainmail was not without its drawbacks, as it offered limited protection against blunt force trauma, an essential factor in a period dominated by heavy-hitting weapons. As time progressed, advances in metallurgy led to the development of plate armour during the 15th century. This innovation resulted in a more solid, segmented formation of metal plates, which afforded greater protection and became a defining characteristic of a knight's appearance. It is also important to recognise that armour was not merely ornamental. It was subjected to rigorous testing in battle to ensure functionality. Knights spent years refining their armour, leading to a variety of designs aimed at enhancing mobility while maximising protection. In addition to armour, the weapons wielded by knights were diverse and tailored to different combat scenarios. The primary weapon of a knight was the sword, a symbol of their status and martial prowess. Swords of this era evolved through various forms, from the broadsword to the more dexterous arming sword, making them versatile tools for both offence and defence. Knights also utilised a range of other weapons, including spears, axes and mace, each designed to exploit different weaknesses in enemy armour. For mounted knights, the lance was a critical weapon, particularly in the context of jousting tournaments that played a major role in maintaining the chivalric culture. Jousting required not just physical skill, but also an understanding of distance and timing, as knights charged at each other in a display of technique and bravery. Such occasions served both to showcase martial ability and to reinforce the ideals of honour that were central to the knightly code. The logistical realities of maintaining armour and weapons present another dimension to understanding the knight's life. Armour and weapons were expensive, requiring considerable resources and craftsmanship to produce. Maintenance and repair were ongoing tasks, especially given the wear and tear they endured during battles and tournaments. Knights often travelled with a retinue of squires and blacksmiths who were responsible for seeing to these needs. The true heft of this equipment was considerable. A fully armoured knight could weigh anywhere from 80 to over 100 pounds, which could place significant physical strain on the wearer. Consequently, the effectiveness of a knight was contingent upon not only the quality of the equipment, but also the physical conditioning and skills honed through years of training. While knights were celebrated for their martial capabilities and the idealised notion of chivalry, the realities of weaponry and armour reveal the many challenges of their profession. The weight of the armour could limit mobility, while the upkeep of weapons and gear was a continuous burden impacting their readiness for battle. Thus, the knight's journey was not merely one of conquest and valour, but of constant adaptation and resilience in a world fraught with challenges. The physicality of their equipment mirrored the complexity of their role in society, serving as a backbone to the chivalric ethos, while demonstrating that the art of warfare was filled with practicality, strategy, and discipline. Through this lens, we can appreciate the lasting legacy of knights not just as heroic figures, but as skilled warriors harnessing the technology and social structures of their time. The meaning of chivalry transcends its medieval origins, becoming a symbol of nuanced virtues, moral complexity, and cultural aspirations. For knights, chivalry encompassed a broad spectrum of expectations that dictated their behaviour both on the battlefield and in courtly life, centred around ideals such as honour, loyalty, and protection of the weak. Chivalry functioned as a moral compass for knights navigating the intricacies of feudal society. The perception of chivalry often leaned towards romantic notions that valorized bravery and gallantry. However, these ideals existed within the framework of a society entrenched in warfare, power struggles, and political ambitions. The juxtaposition of noble aspirations and the often violent reality of a knight's duties presents a rich tapestry of contradictions that define the historical narrative of chivalry. One cannot overlook the dichotomy between the ideals of chivalry and the actions of some knights throughout history. Many knights committed acts of brutality and cruelty that starkly contrasted with their professed values. The concept of honour could easily devolve into a justification for violence or vendetta, with rampant feuds between noble families often obscuring the noble tenets of chivalry. Historians depict knights like the notorious William Wallace, or those involved in the Crusades wielding both sword and entourage to meth with gallantry during conquest, despite the bloodshed associated with such exploits. This gap between expectation and reality has sparked debates among scholars who question whether chivalry was an effective moral framework or merely an ideal to which knights aspired while indulging in the darker aspects of human nature. Chivalry also bore immense social implications, serving as a catalyst for the evolution of relationships between men and women. The concept of courtly love, intertwined with chivalric ideals, emerged during the Middle Ages, positioning women as objects of admiration and respect. Knights were often expected to demonstrate their admiration for women through acts of devotion and loyalty, a departure from the earlier depiction of women as mere possessions within a patriarchal framework. This development opened a dialogue regarding gender dynamics, although the reality was often fraught with complexity. Women held little power during this era, and were frequently subject to the whims of men, yet the chivalric ideal served to elevate their status within the cultural narrative, illustrating their importance in the chivalric worldview. In this context, chivalry emerged not merely as a military code, but as an evolving social contract, shaped by the broader cultural environment and experiences of the time. In modern times, the concept of chivalry has undergone numerous reinterpretations, often stripped of its original martial connotations and redefined through the lens of contemporary ethics and behaviour. Today, discussions around chivalry may arise in contexts ranging from social interactions to notions of respect in relationships. By drawing upon the fundamental virtues found in the chivalric code, honour, loyalty and respect, modern society continues to grapple with the complexities inherent in how we treat one another. The legacy of chivalry lives on not only as an emblem of knightly valour, but also as a reminder of the intricate interplay between ideals and actions, the personal and the societal, and the evolution of moral and ethical conduct through the ages. As we reflect on the myths and realities of chivalry, we discover not only lessons from the past, but also insights that resonate in our paths toward embracing honour and integrity in our daily lives. The Middle Ages, often romanticised as a period of knights and chivalry, was also a time fraught with uncertainty, ignorance and fear, especially concerning health and medicine. The understanding of disease and the human body during this period was rudimentary at best, heavily influenced by the prevailing cultural attitudes and religious beliefs of the time. Physicians operated within a system of thought that combined ancient practices, folklore and superstition, leading to unique treatments that often appear bizarre to the modern eye. Consequently, the medieval approach to medicine involved a convoluted blend of herbal remedies, mystical beliefs, and physical interventions, reflecting an era grappling with the dual forces of reason and the mysterious nature of illness. The period in Europe from the 5th to the late 15th centuries was characterised by significant social upheaval, the decline of the Roman Empire and the rise of feudalism, all of which affected various aspects of life, including health and healing. As universities began to emerge, the study of medicine became more formalised, yet prevalent misconceptions about the body and disease created a fertile ground for strange remedies and bizarre treatments. Through exploration of these elements, we gain insight into the multifaceted nature of medieval medicine. It was a time when fear of the unknown dictated treatment options, and when practitioners held both power and vulnerability in their hands as they sought to navigate the tangled web of human illness and the quest for wellness. The medieval medical landscape was dominated by the use of herbs as remedies for various ailments, and a plethora of superstitions that shaped treatment practices. Herbal medicine was not merely an art, it was often codified in texts that guided practitioners in the selection and application of these natural resources. Medieval doctors were influenced by the works of ancient physicians like Hippocrates and Galen, who laid the foundation for the understanding of bodily humours. Physicians believed that the 4 humours necessary for health could be affected by various factors, including diet, climate, and lifestyle. Thus, the selection of herbs was crucial, and practitioners relied on manuals that provided detailed information on the properties of various plants and their known therapeutic effects. The extensive use of herbs ranged from those found in the immediate environment to exotic imports from far-off lands. Common herbs included garlic, which was believed to ward off infections, and willow bark, used for pain relief. The lore surrounding these herbs was deepened by the belief in their magical properties, often tied to folklore. For example, St. John's wort was not only believed to treat wounds, but also to ward off evil spirits. Similarly, rosemary was frequently used in both culinary and healing contexts, symbolising fidelity and remembrance, attributes linked to a healthy mind and body. The connection between herbs and the mystical elements of everyday life infused medieval medicine with a sense of wonder and fear, leading to treatments that integrated both physical and spiritual dimensions. At the same time, superstition held a significant place in medieval medicine, informing beliefs about health and illness that went beyond herbalism. Practitioners would consult astrology when diagnosing diseases, linking the ailments of their patients to the positions of celestial bodies. This practice, known as astrological medicine, was prevalent throughout Europe, where practitioners believed that the stars influenced not only one's personality, but also their health. For instance, certain diseases were thought to correlate with the cycles of the moon, leading to increased fear and rituals performed during specific lunar phases. Charms, amulets, and talismans were commonly used as preventive measures or treatments for ailments, reflecting a deep-rooted belief in the divine's influence on human health. Consequently, amulets crafted from specific herbs or inscribed with sacred symbols were worn to invoke protection and healing, showcasing the intricate blend of medicine and magic prevalent in medieval society. The spectrum of diseases that plagued medieval society was broad, ranging from common ailments to devastating epidemics. Among the most feared was the bubonic plague, frequently referred to as the Black Death, which decimated populations across Europe in the 14th century. Its arrival in Europe circa 1347 marked a pivotal moment in history, with estimates suggesting that up to 1/3 of Europe's population succumbed to the disease. The understanding of its cause was steeped in misconceptions, shaped by a lack of scientific knowledge and prevailing superstitions. Many believed the plague was transmitted through miasmas, or bad air, resulting from decaying matter and foul odours, rather than bacteria carried by fleas on infected rats. This misunderstanding led to a variety of ineffective treatments, such as the burning of aromatic herbs or the wearing of masks filled with fragrant substances in an attempt to ward off the disease. The plague was not just seen as an illness, but also as a punishment from God, spurring mass hysteria and deepening the connection between faith and medicine. Entire communities resorted to prayer and penance, believing that moral rectitude could absolve them of the affliction. Other common diseases included leprosy, syphilis, smallpox, and various gastrointestinal ailments. Leprosy, known as Hansen's disease, was primarily blamed on divine curse or punishment, leading to the social ostracization and cruelty towards those diagnosed. Individuals with leprosy were required to submit to stringent societal regulations, often forced to wear distinctive clothing, or identify themselves with bells to warn others of their presence. The isolation they faced reflected both the misunderstood nature of the disease and the prevailing attitudes that equated illness with moral failure or divine wrath. Syphilis, which emerged later in the Middle Ages, created confusion and fear, believed to be a punishment from God for immoral behaviour. Its symptoms were often misattributed to other diseases, substantially complicating the understanding and treatment of affected individuals. Besides their physical afflictions, syphilitics faced social stigma, driving them further into isolation and shame. Gastrointestinal issues, including dysentery and food poisoning, were rampant, attributed to contaminated food and poor hygiene. Common remedies ranged from herbal infusions to extreme fasting or purging, practices rooted in the belief that illness resulted from an imbalance of humours linked to diet. This attribution further nuanced patients' relationships with their own bodies, often leading to misguided self-care practices and a cycle of illness stemming from fear-based dietary restrictions. Such misconceptions about disease causality reflected a worldview where the invisible forces of sin and cosmic imbalance were seen in a direct relationship with bodily maladies. Amidst this chaotic medical landscape, barber surgeons emerged as pivotal figures in healthcare. Originating from the dual practices of haircutting and surgical interventions, these practitioners operated on the fringes of the medical profession. They were often the first point of contact for patients, providing a range of services from basic wound care to tooth extraction and even post-operative care. Due to their often limited formal training, barber surgeons were considered lower in the medical hierarchy compared to physicians. Yet their services were crucial for everyday people, who turned to them for practical and accessible solutions to health problems that often defied the more theoretical practices of learned physicians. One of the most notorious practices associated with barber surgeons was bloodletting, believed to restore the balance of humours within the body. Venesection, or the opening of a vein, was thought to cure various ailments, from fevers to headaches. Techniques varied, ranging from simple leech application to more invasive methods involving knives or lancets. The choice often depended on the perceived severity of the ailment. It was not uncommon for barber surgeons to carry out these procedures in a public setting, showcasing their prowess while instilling both fear and awe in onlookers. The act of bloodletting often became a spectacle, drawing crowds who sought to witness the event, which reflected the societal interplay between entertainment and medicine. Despite the introduction of bloodletting as a viable treatment, its efficacy was dubious, with many patients experiencing adverse effects rather than improvement. In some cases, bloodletting was repeated several times over various sessions, leading to severe blood loss and worsening conditions. This practice exemplified the broader medical culture of the time, where intuition and tradition often overshadowed empirical evidence. Recognizing this duality allows us to appreciate how the remnants of ancient beliefs and newly emerging medical practices began to influence one another, creating discord yet simultaneously sparking an interest in more systematic investigations into the field. In the late Middle Ages, figures like Paracelsus began challenging these age-old practices, heralding a shift towards a more scientific approach. However, such transformations unfolded at a slow pace against the backdrop of deeply ingrained superstitions and traditional knowledge. In retrospect, medieval medicine was a fascinating amalgamation of herbalism, superstition, and rudimentary surgical practices. While society struggled to comprehend the nature of illness, physicians and barber surgeons navigated a landscape rife with misconceptions, often responding with remedies and treatments that varied greatly in effectiveness. The reliance on superstitious beliefs overshadowed the genuine attempts at healing that emerged during this period, highlighting a poignant gap between medieval and modern medicine. Understanding this historical context provides valuable perspectives about the evolution of healthcare practices, reminding us how deeply societal beliefs can shape the approach to health and illness. As we observe the transition toward more empirical approaches in medicine, we also acknowledge that the experimentation, peculiar remedies, and beliefs of the past set the stage for modern practices. Treatments that seem strange to us today often served as precursors for advancements in understanding the human body. For instance, while bloodletting eventually fell out of favour, it contributed to discussions regarding the circulatory system and blood's role in health. Today, the legacy of medieval medicine continues to resonate, reminding us of the complexities inherent in the evolution of healthcare and the enduring quest to unravel the mysteries of the human body. This narrative not only reflects a bygone era, but also invites us to reflect on our perceptions of medicine today, recognising the ongoing dance between scientific inquiry, cultural beliefs, and the ever-continuing search for healing. Thus, the story of medieval medicine is not just an exploration of the past, it is a reminder of humanity's relentless quest for knowledge and understanding in the face of suffering and the unknown. The medieval period, often referred to as the Middle Ages, witnessed significant social, political, and cultural transformations that played a formative role in the course of European history. At the very heart of this transformation were the monasteries and the monks who inhabited them. These religious communities were not merely spiritual sanctuaries, they were vital centres for education, healthcare, and the preservation of knowledge. As pillars of medieval society, monasteries fulfilled a range of societal and spiritual needs, acting as repositories of intellectual, agricultural, and medical knowledge. This script explores the indispensable role of monasteries and monks in medieval society, focusing on their responsibilities in preserving knowledge through manuscripts, the day in their lives, and the importance of monasteries as hospitals and schools. One of the most critical contributions of medieval monks was their role in preserving knowledge through the painstaking work of manuscript transcription. The historical context of the early medieval period, marked by the collapse of the Western Roman Empire, saw a significant decline in literacy and education. In this environment, monasteries emerged as the primary repositories of learning, safeguarding ancient texts and religious writings that might otherwise have been lost to time. Monks, dedicated to the service of God and the pursuit of knowledge, took upon themselves the monumental task of copying, translating, and illuminating manuscripts. This labour-intensive process was marked by meticulous attention to detail, as scribes would often labour for hours, writing out text by hand and ensuring accuracy and fidelity. Typically, the manuscripts produced in these monastic scriptoria contained not only religious material, such as the Bible and writings of church fathers, but also classical works from antiquity that spanned various fields, including philosophy, science, and literature. This conscientious effort to copy texts ensured that invaluable knowledge was transmitted from the classical world to the medieval one, establishing the monks as the gatekeepers of intellectual heritage. They created vibrant libraries filled with codices that would serve scholars for centuries. The establishment of monastic educational institutions by the 12th century saw an increased demand for these texts, compelling more monks to engage in the practice of copying and further planting the seeds of the intellectual revival known as the Renaissance. Furthermore, monasteries became veritable centres for scholarship, as monks actively engaged in theological debates, composed commentaries on existing works, and authored new texts that addressed contemporary issues within the church and society. This environment of scholarly activity not only allowed for the preservation of a wide array of knowledge, but also facilitated the development of new ideas and interpretations. Monks contributed to the fields of history, language, and natural sciences, laying the groundwork for future generations of scholars. Their dedication to knowledge ensured that important texts were not only saved, but also critically examined, analysed, and expanded upon, substantially contributing to the intellectual landscape of the Middle Ages and beyond. The impact of monkish scholarship extended far beyond their own immediate communities. In their quest for knowledge, monks established networks of correspondence and pilgrimage that connected monasteries across Europe. Monastic houses would share texts, ideas, and best practices, allowing for a greater exchange of knowledge. This interplay would ultimately contribute to the flowering of intellectual thought during the medieval period, culminating in the establishment of universities in the late Middle Ages. The contributions of monks in preserving manuscripts created a lasting legacy that allowed future generations to build upon the knowledge gleaned from the past, thus shaping the trajectory of academic inquiry in the Western world. The life of a medieval monk was defined by a strict daily schedule that balanced work, prayer, and communal living, adhering to the rule of St. Benedict, which provided a comprehensive framework for monastic life. A typical day began before dawn, as monks would rise to the sound of a bell signalling the start of their morning prayers, known as matins. These early observances reinforced their commitment to God and initiated a day filled with contemplation and service. Following matins, the monks would engage in additional readings from scripture, reflection, and personal prayer time, practices that allowed for deepening their spiritual resolve in the presence of God. As morning turned to daylight, the monks would shift their focus to various forms of labour, a fundamental aspect of monastic life rooted in the idea of ora et labora, meaning pray and work. This work could include the cultivation of the monastery's extensive gardens and farmlands, where they cultivated fruits, vegetables, and grains for sustenance. Many monasteries became pioneers in agricultural practices, implementing innovation through crop rotation and selective breeding, providing food not only for their community but also for the local populace. Meanwhile, those monks trained in the art of manuscript illumination would retreat to the scriptorium, taking on roles such as scribes, artists, and proofreaders. This collaboration fostered efficiency, creativity, and a sense of camaraderie among the monks. The day continued with set periods of worship and communal prayers, known as the Divine Office, which punctuated their hours. This series of prayers and hymns recited at fixed times throughout the day, lauds, prime, terce, sext, nun, vespers, and compline, were integral to monastic life, reinforcing the community's spiritual foundation. During these prayers, monks would chant in unison, expressing their devotion and unity of purpose. Evenings often involved fellowship time, during which monks shared meals and engaged in discussions about their daily experiences, scholarly pursuits, and communal challenges, fostering a sense of belonging and support. As night descended, the monks would gather for evening prayers and reflect on the day's labours, giving thanks and asking for guidance for the future. After compline, they would retire for the night, their schedules meticulously designed to balance spirituality with physical labour and intellectual pursuits. Through this routine, the monks cultivated not only their faith, but also a way of life that emphasized discipline, community, and the quest for divine truth. Within the cloistered walls of the monastery, they sought to live out their commitment to God, often finding deeper meaning in their everyday tasks, whether in the chapel, garden, or scriptorium. Beyond their spiritual and educational role, monasteries served as crucial institutions providing care and education to their surrounding communities. In an age where organised healthcare systems were virtually non-existent, many monasteries stepped into the void and operated as hospitals, offering medical assistance and shelter to the sick, the poor, and travellers in need. The monks, guided by Christian principles of compassion and service, established infirmaries within their walls. These infirmaries became centres of healing where medical knowledge, compiled from classical texts and monastic observation, was used to treat various ailments. Monks served as some of the earliest healthcare practitioners, applying their understanding of herbal remedies and natural medicines while practicing physical care that transcended spiritual guidance. Monastic medicine was characterized by its holistic approach, which recognized the interplay between body, mind, and spirit. Monks frequently recorded their medical practices, allowing for the sharing and development of knowledge among various monastic communities. Many monasteries cultivated medicinal gardens filled with herbs, providing an essential resource for remedies and treatments. Notably, the ability to read and write allowed monks to translate ancient medical texts, thus preserving and perpetuating health-related knowledge. The role of monasteries grew even more essential during times of crises, such as epidemics or local famines, when communities relied heavily on them for physical and spiritual sustenance alike. In addition to healthcare, monasteries also became central to education, laying the groundwork for a more educated society. The institution of monastic schools grew increasingly relevant, particularly in the later medieval period, as monks recognized the need to train the next generation in not just religious matters, but also in various practical skills and disciplines. Monasteries became some of the few centres of learning during these times, where the ability to read, write, and engage critically with theological matters was taught. The curriculum offered at these schools went beyond the narrow confines of clerical education and expanded to encompass subjects such as grammar, rhetoric, logic, arithmetic, geometry, astronomy, and music, elements of the liberal arts. Monks aimed to cultivate both the intellect and the spirit, ultimately benefiting the church and society. The presence of monastic schools facilitated the rise of a literate populace that could engage with complex theological and social issues. Furthermore, monasteries often produced written materials to disseminate knowledge widely, fostering an atmosphere of scholarly inquiry. The impact of monastic education was felt well beyond the cloistered walls, as the students trained within these schools would often go on to take positions of authority in church or government. Additionally, monasteries sponsored various crafts and trades through apprenticeship systems, thus providing essential skills and knowledge to the local populace. By facilitating the exchange of knowledge and skills, monasteries contributed to economic stability, became hubs of local culture, and promoted social welfare, all while instilling the virtues of learning and service. In conclusion, the role of monasteries and monks during the medieval period extended far beyond their religious significance as places of worship. As guardians of knowledge, they preserved invaluable manuscripts that shaped Western intellectual history, provided education, and cared for their communities through hospitals and schools. The daily lives of monks were imbued with discipline and devotion, reflecting their commitment to a life dedicated to God while simultaneously addressing the social and educational needs of the people around them. Understanding this remarkable aspect of medieval society reveals that monasteries were vibrant centres of learning, healing, and cultural continuity, crucial elements that contributed to the resilience and evolution of European civilization during a time of great change and uncertainty. The legacy of the monasteries endures in contemporary society, reminding us of the transformative power of knowledge, community service, and the enduring quest for spiritual fulfillment. Thus, the rich tapestry of monastic life and the profound impact monks had on shaping the medieval world cannot be overstated. Their influence continues to resonate through the corridors of history, providing insights into the values that shaped our modern world today. In the annals of history, the medieval period is often romanticized through colourful illustrations of grand feasts, complete with opulent decorations, laughter, and an abundance of food flowing forth from tables piled high with dishes. However, the reality of medieval dining was far more complex, reflecting a social hierarchy and economic realities that dictated what people consumed. This script delves into the culinary landscape of medieval feasts, revealing what people really ate, not the oversized turkey legs often associated with medieval fairs, but a host of diverse dishes that varied significantly by class. We will further explore the differences in diets between the noble classes and the peasantry, shed light on the peculiar table manners of the time, and uncover some of the more unusual recipes characteristic of medieval cuisine. When conjuring images of medieval feasts, many envision tables overflowing with extravagant meats and festive dishes. However, the reality was far less extravagant for the average person. For the nobility, feasting was a public display of wealth and power, characterized by a variety of meats including strongly flavoured game, peacock and swan, all of which were often elaborately prepared and seasoned. Records indicate meals could consist of richly spiced dishes like pottage and meat pies, sometimes filled with exotic ingredients imported through trade. Spices such as saffron, cinnamon and pepper were highly sought after, elevating the dining experience and showcasing affluence. Contrary to popular belief, the iconic turkey legs commonly associated with medieval fairs did not become a staple until much later. Instead, chicken and pork were more prevalent among the higher classes. For the peasantry, the dining experience was strikingly different. Most rural folk subsisted on simpler, seasonal foods that reflected their socio-economic realities. Their diet was often dominated by porridge made from grains, mainly barley and rye, and supplemented with vegetables like onions, leeks and cabbage. Meat was a rare luxury for peasants, reserved for special occasions or provided during periods of surplus. Dairy products, such as cheese and butter, formed critical sources of nourishment. Fish was also common, especially near coastal areas and riversides, where lean freshwater fish supplemented the diet. This stark contrast in food availability not only reflects the economic disparities of medieval society, but also informs us about the societal structure, wherein feasts served as opulent reflections of status and power among the elite. The culinary gulf between the nobility and the peasantry highlights the broader third dimension of medieval life. Noble households often employed a range of cooks who specialised in turning familiar ingredients into lavish dishes infused with imported spices. Documented records reveal that noble meals featured multiple courses, sometimes extending to dozens of dishes in a single event. Reinventing the concept of banquets, these occasions were festive gatherings set against a backdrop of music, entertainment, and revelry. Each dish served was meticulously crafted, often designed to impress guests with intricate presentations. Interestingly, many noble meals included not just the completed dishes, but also the carcasses of animals, which were presented at the table whole as part of the theatricality of the feast. In contrast, the peasant diet revolved around practicality and sustenance rather than excess and indulgence. Throughout the winter months, when fresh produce was scarce, they relied heavily on preserved foods, pickled vegetables and salted meats. One way peasant diets varied by region was based on local agricultural practices. For instance, those living in northern regions often consumed hearty root vegetables, while southern communities might eat more legumes and grains. This essential difference in diet underscores not only the economic disparity, but also the differential lifestyles ingrained in the structure of feudal society. Ultimately, the noble diets encapsulated ideals of power and extravagance, while peasant diets illustrated resilience and practicality. Table manners in the medieval period were a reflection of social standing, cultural customs, and norms that dictated behaviour during meals. For the nobility, dining was laden with etiquette that underscored their status. Meals were often consumed while seated on stools arranged around a long table, or at a raised dais where the lord presided. The use of utensils was rudimentary, with knives being one of the few tools widely employed, while most food was consumed using fingers, as forks were not adopted until the Renaissance. Bread, often referred to as trencher bread, played a vital role, serving as both a plate and a food source. It would be soggy from sauces by the meal's end and consumed along with the leftovers. Peasant table manners, though less formal, still adhered to certain rules, often dictated by necessity and custom rather than luxury. Meals were typically shared among family or community members, seated around a low table or the ground, feasting from communal bowls. The respect for food was inherent, and wasted scraps or improper conduct would often draw frowns from family elders. Breaking bread together was both a deeply ingrained tradition and an essential part of creating social bonds, previewing the spiritual significance of the meal rather than focusing merely on its sustenance. Thus, while the nobility exhibited elaborate rituals, peasants displayed their own form of communal respect through shared meals, signifying a mutual acknowledgement of their struggle and efforts. Amidst the more conventional fare, the medieval period also gave rise to some peculiar recipes that spark curiosity today. Some medieval dishes might appear unfathomable to modern palates, yet they were an essential part of the era's culinary tradition. One notorious dish was stewed eel, prepared with a combination of spices and slow-cooked to perfection, often regarded as a delicacy in noble households. Then there were pudding pies, bizarre concoctions that featured not only various meats, but also ingredients like dried fruits and spices that showcased the era's commitment to experimentation. Meanwhile, the middle class explored strange recipes as well, perhaps most notably salads, which were not salads in the modern sense but rather combinations of different types of herbs and greens, dressed in vinegars and flavoured with various spices. The cookbook The Form of Cury, dating back to the late 14th century, showcases the intricate blend of flavours that were emblematic of the time. One bizarre example from this cookbook includes peacock pie, which featured the bird cooked, plucked, and then served whole, often with the addition of saffron and other lavish spices. Another enduring, albeit strange recipe was sugary fritters, combining fried dough with rich syrup or even honey, highlighting the medieval fascination with completing a meal with sweet indulgences. These recipes are significant not only for the shock value they present today, but also for their significance in showcasing the culture, values, and creativity of medieval cuisine, transcending simple sustenance into a form of artistic expression. The examination of medieval feasts and food opens a vivid window into a society filled with nuance, inequality, and unexpected culinary achievements. The stark contrast between noble and peasant diets, paired with the unique table manners and bizarre recipes of the time, reveals a narrative that challenges romanticised perceptions. Food, after all, serves not only as sustenance, but also as a reflection of a culture's values and social structure, illustrating the subtleties of privilege and scarcity that define the medieval experience. As we explore historical records, we appreciate how the fundamental act of sharing meals, whether at a grand banquet or within a humble abode, is ingrained within the human experience, forging connections that transcend time and place. Thus, the culinary legacy of the medieval era continues to captivate our interest, revealing an era that was as rich in flavour as it was in history. The Black Death, a catastrophic pandemic that swept through Europe in the mid-14th century, stands as one of the most devastating events in human history. The plague, believed to have originated in Asia, claimed the lives of an estimated 25 to 30 million people, eradicating nearly one-third of Europe's population. The sheer scale of this catastrophe left indelible marks on social, economic and cultural structures that fundamentally altered the course of European history. Emerging along trade routes, the plague exploited public health weaknesses, advanced rapidly through burgeoning urban centres, and took advantage of the common practices and beliefs held by people at the time. In this script, we will delve deeper into the mechanics of how the Black Death spread and why it proved to be so deadly, the strange and often ineffective cures people attempted, and the transformative impact of the plague on medieval society. The trajectory of the Black Death across Europe was characterised by a complex interplay of social, economic and environmental factors that conspired to enable its unprecedented spread. The primary agent of the plague was the bacterium Yersinia pestis, which thrived in the bodies of fleas that often infested rats, the primary carriers of the disease. As commercial trade flourished during this period, particularly along the Silk Road and maritime routes in the Mediterranean, infected rodents and fleas stowed away with merchants and traders, facilitating the spread of the plague to new regions. When these traders arrived in densely populated urban centres, the hygienic conditions, marked by substandard waste disposal, polluted water sources and overcrowded living conditions, created a fertile ground for transmission. The plague's unparalleled lethality is fundamentally rooted in the unique biological characteristics of Yersinia pestis and the socio-political context of the era. Epidemiologically, the bacterium could lead to several forms of plague, with the bubonic strain being the most recognised. Symptoms typically included fever, chills, vomiting, and the development of painful buboes, swollen lymph nodes that signalled the body's immune response. Historically, the mortality rate for those infected with bubonic plague oscillated between 50% and 60%. The shockingly high mortality rate, coupled with limited medical understanding and the concurrent challenges of famine and malnutrition, rendered the population especially vulnerable to the plague's impact. Many were ill-prepared for the mental and physical toll that such a catastrophic event would unleash. Moreover, social dynamics exacerbated the spread of the disease. The period preceding the Black Death was marked by a series of crises, including agrarian failures and economic instability, which catalysed a climate of fear, distrust and social unrest. As regions succumbed to contagion, panic often led to desperate measures. Individuals fled infected areas, unknowingly carrying the disease with them. Moreover, the disease exacerbated existing prejudices, leading to scapegoating of marginalised communities or minority groups, such as Jews and marginalised peasants. In times of crisis, humans often resort to irrational behaviour, complicating the public health crisis even further and accelerating the pace at which the plague spread. Faced with the relentless onslaught of the Black Death, communities resorted to a plethora of strange, often bizarre treatments in their desperate bid for survival. With a rudimentary understanding of disease transmission and causation, medieval medicine leaned heavily on theories rooted in superstition, folklore, and fragmented medical knowledge. One prominent belief was that the plague was a manifestation of divine wrath or punishment, leading many to seek atonement through profound religious fervour. Public processions, confessions, and acts of penance were thought to offer spiritual protection from the scourge. Pilgrimage to holy sites increased dramatically, as individuals sought solace and divine intercession to cure themselves or their loved ones. One of the most fascinating aspects of the medical response during the Black Death was the concoction of herbal remedies aimed at purifying the air, a concept based on the miasma theory, which posited that bad air could be the source of disease. People turned to a variety of plants and spices, with garlic, onions, and various aromatic herbs often mentioned as curative agents. It was believed that these spices could ward off infection by purifying the foul air that was thought to cause the disease. Additionally, the practice of bloodletting was a common, misguided medical approach, as physicians sought to balance the humours within the body. The rationale behind this was grounded in ancient medical tradition, but it ultimately proved to be counterproductive, inflicting further harm upon already weakened patients. The desperation trickled down to the margins of society, as unqualified charlatans emerged, offering dubious cures and miraculous potions. Amid the pervasive fear and anxiety, the market for magical amulets, talismans, and charms flourished. These so-called protective devices were promoted by unscrupulous sellers who preyed on fearful communities. Some individuals even resorted to more grotesque practices, like the application of magical blood or the use of animal parts, in the hope that these rituals would confer protection or healing. Self-flagellation and other extreme measures to devise forms of penance became commonplace as individuals sought to appease divine forces they believed were unleashing calamity upon their communities. Perhaps the most ironic feature of this desperate search for a cure was the widespread, yet futile, attempts to flee from the disease. Those who could afford to escape often sought refuge in the countryside, erroneously believing that distance would shield them from contagion. However, this mass exodus frequently resulted in the transport of infected individuals into previously unscathed regions, accelerating the plague's proliferation. Despite the best intentions, these actions inadvertently compounded the devastation, illustrating how societal fear can lead to irrational decision-making that exacerbates prevailing crises. The profound social and cultural upheaval wrought by the Black Death cannot be overstated, as it fundamentally reshaped the facets of daily life in medieval Europe. Following the immediate devastation of the epidemic, significant demographic changes altered the labour market. The severe depopulation led to an acute shortage of workers, which in turn prompted wage increases for surviving labourers. As peasants gained leverage in negotiating their conditions, traditional feudal systems began to fracture. The rigid class structures that had defined medieval European societies for centuries began to erode, giving rise to a more fluid socio-economic structure. With labour in high demand, many serfs and labourers seized the opportunity to demand better pay and working conditions, marking the beginning of the decline of feudalism. The economic shifts also translated into a more generalised sense of social mobility. Guilds and trade organisations began to reassess their membership and practices to adapt to the new economic reality, with many individuals from the lower classes gaining access to new opportunities. The blacksmith or the baker, once at the bottom of the hierarchy, could now negotiate for better conditions, and some ascended into the emerging middle class, contributing to a slowly enlarging sphere of economic power. The demographic realignment reverberated through society, setting the stage for significant social transformation over the coming decades. The psychological and emotional effects of the plague on society were equally profound, altering how individuals and communities perceived life, death, and their spiritual beliefs. As towns and cities faced staggering losses, collective grief became a shared experience. Public mourning rituals gained prominence, reflecting an increasing societal focus on individual piety and personal connection with the divine. The existing religious structures, particularly the Catholic Church, faced immense pressure due to the perceived failure to offer protection from the disease, leading to a crisis of faith for many. This shift laid the groundwork for religious reformation movements, including the rise of Protestantism, which questioned dogmatic authority and offered alternative spiritual paths. The cultural landscape following the Black Death changed dramatically, as art and literature began to reflect the existential struggle of humanity in the face of mortality. Prominent works, such as Giovanni Boccaccio's The Decameron, depicted the realities of life during the plague, exploring themes of hedonism, despair, and the moral quandaries faced by individuals in crisis. The consequences of the epidemic sparked a greater emphasis on human emotions and individual experience, laying the foundations for the humanist ideals that would characterize the Renaissance. Artistic representations shifted to capture the human experience, focusing on realism, emotion, and existential themes, an overt reflection of the societal introspection that followed the plague years. Additionally, the Black Death resulted in advancements in public health infrastructure as communities, now acutely aware of the need for improved sanitary conditions, embraced preventive measures. The establishment of quarantine laws and public health policies became essential responses to combat future outbreaks. The notion that health was influenced by environmental factors began to take hold, enhancing societal understanding of disease transmission in the long run. Public spaces were looked at through the lens of hygiene, prompting changes in urban planning and infrastructure that would shape cities for centuries to come. Ultimately, the calamity of the Black Death catalysed a host of enduring transformations within medieval society. While it initially manifested as a tragedy of immense proportions, the interconnected shifts in labour dynamics, religious practices, cultural orientations and public health laid the groundwork for the modern European landscape. By navigating the aftermath of such destruction, society not only displayed remarkable resilience, but also marked a pivotal moment of evolution that invited future generations to build on their past experiences. The lessons learned from the struggles, adaptations and innovations that emerged from the Black Death continue to carry significance today, perhaps serving as a cautionary tale as humanity faces its contemporary battles with disease and societal upheavals. In retrospect, the Black Death remains a colossal testament to humanity's vulnerability to infectious diseases and the unpredictable forces of nature. By examining the intricate dynamics surrounding the epidemic, from the spread of the disease itself to the eccentric remedies and profound societal transformations, we gain invaluable insights into how such events can delineate historical trajectories. The aftermath of the Black Death was one of loss, suffering, but also resilience and adaptation, highlighting the intricate interplay between crisis and change. As modern society grapples with its own challenges, the legacy of the Black Death serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of public health, compassionate governance, and community solidarity in the pursuit of human welfare. The past, in its complexity, imbues us with lessons on the fragility of existence while also showcasing humanity's capacity for innovation and reinvention in the face of adversity. The Middle Ages, a period that spanned from the 5th to the late 15th century, was characterised by a pervasive sense of mysticism and a rich tapestry of superstitions. Society's understanding of the world was deeply intertwined with religious beliefs, folk magic, and an ever-present acknowledgement of the supernatural. With limited scientific knowledge and a vast expanse of unexplained natural phenomena, people turned to superstition to make sense of their environment and the events that shaped their lives, whether it was the turning of the seasons, the occurrence of illness, or the unpredictability of harvests. These events were frequently attributed to the influence of unseen forces, often believed to be manifestations of divine will or malignant spirits. Such beliefs were not merely private convictions, they were integral to communal identity and social order, acting as a form of governance in a world fraught with uncertainty. Religious institutions wielded significant power during this period, influencing both personal and communal beliefs. The Church often appropriated existing pagan superstitions and blended them with Christian ideologies, leading to a syncretism that imbued traditional practices with new meanings. Castles and cathedrals rose alongside ancient shrines and sacred groves, creating a cultural landscape rich with both religious veneration and folk beliefs. This interplay between the sacred and the superstitious served to create a narrative framework within which people could interpret their lives. Believers frequently sought the counsel of clergy or other spiritually knowledgeable individuals to navigate their concerns, lending authority to the narratives around local customs. Thus, in a deeply spiritual age, tales of magic, miracles, and the mysterious were woven into the very fabric of existence. The Middle Ages were marked by profound awe and fear of nature, leading people to imbue natural events, be they storms, droughts, or diseases, with layers of meaning derived from both religious conviction and magical belief. Cataclysmic weather events like storms or droughts were interpreted not merely as natural occurrences, but as divine messages or punishments. People believed that these events were manifestations of God's will, often seen as testing or punishing humanity for their sins. This idea was prevalent enough that communities would frequently come together in prayer or penance to seek divine intervention or forgiveness. As such, natural disasters were often framed within theological discourse rather than scientific rationale, leaving them ripe for interpretation through the lens of superstition. In parallel, folk magic surged in popularity as a means of explaining and manoeuvring around misfortune. When crops failed or illness struck, local populations sometimes turned to local healers and wise women, who utilised potions, charms and rituals to exert influence over the unseen world. The elders' knowledge of herbal remedies and folk practices often coexisted in a delicate balance with ecclesiastical teachings. Popular notions about witches, both malevolent and benevolent, sprung from this cultural milieu where women predominantly held the role of healers and caretakers. Spells to ensure a good harvest or ward off illness were commonplace in rural communities. However, this relationship was fraught. The very practices that provided solace could also lead to persecution, as the Church increasingly labelled certain folk beliefs as heretical or dangerous. Compounding the fear of natural events and diseases was the pervasive belief in demons and evil spirits that thrived in the shadows of the medieval world. It was not unusual for individuals to attribute personal misfortunes or the ill health of livestock to demonic influence. This belief system created an existential sense of anxiety that provoked entire communities to seek protective measures, such as incantations, amulets, or rituals aimed at warding off unseen threats. Superstitions mixed with sacramental practices, the sprinkling of holy water, the lighting of candles, and the invocation of saints created a framework in which followers believed that spiritual forces were engaged in an ongoing battle for their souls. Through this lens, magic and religion became inseparably intertwined, offering both comfort and an explanation for the uncertainties of life. Belief in witches, demons, and fairies flourished in the Middle Ages, with an intricate web of folklore weaving through both the rural landscape and burgeoning urban centres. Witches were often depicted as the antithesis of social order. They were blamed for a plethora of societal ills, from unexplained illnesses and crop failures to the deaths of livestock and children. The character of the witch, often rooted in older pagan traditions and female healing practices, became increasingly demonized as church doctrine took a firmer hold over societal norms. Trials and accusations of witchcraft proliferated, particularly during periods of societal upheaval such as the Black Death or the 30 Years' War. Such events made communities more susceptible to scapegoating, with witches identified as convenient vessels for expressing anxiety and fear. Demons were seen as agents of chaos and disruption, often lurking on the fringes of a community's consciousness. Theologically, demons were understood to be fallen angels, aligned with satanic forces, and were capable of possessing the living, causing madness or illness. These fears were further fueled by church teachings that warned of the dangers lurking within the human soul. Practices aimed at exorcising evil spirits flourished, as individuals sought to protect themselves and their communities from the malicious influence of these malevolent beings. Superstitions surrounding demonology coexisted with Christian sacramental practices, leading to a complex negotiation between traditional beliefs and formal religious frameworks. Many common individuals sought the aid of priests, herb witches, and local shamans to combat the perceived threats of demons, creating a rich tapestry of intermingling faiths. Equally mesmerising yet fearful were the beliefs in fairies, who embodied the supernatural forces of the natural world. Often viewed as capricious beings, fairies straddled the line between benevolence and malevolence. Tales of encounters with fairies speak of mischievous actions that brought about good fortune, as well as sinister plots that led to illness or death. However, these narratives were not merely fanciful tales. They functioned as moral lessons about the dangers of hubris. Hubris itself viewed as a transgression against the divine order. One common belief was that failure to honour these mystical beings through offerings or rituals could invite their wrath. Unique customs, such as leaving out remnants of food or laying offerings by trees, were intended to curry favour with fairies and keep misfortune at bay. These beliefs reflected a worldview wherein the divinely ordained order was perpetually threatened by chaotic supernatural forces. During the Middle Ages, astrology gained prominence as a vital tool for understanding and predicting life's path by examining celestial bodies' influences. Many people turned to the stars and planets for insights into health, love, fortune, and decisions. The alignment of celestial bodies was believed to dictate events on Earth, offering a cosmic grid through which people could interpret their circumstances. Influential thinkers, such as astrological philosophers and clergy, often cloaked astrology in the language of divine providence, aligning it with religious beliefs. This synthesis fostered acceptance among both the literate elite and common folks, as astrology could be employed to explain social hierarchies, natural events, and personal fortunes. Astrology permeated daily life, finding its way into agriculture, medicine, and politics. Farmers sought guidance in celestial calendars, timing their planting and harvesting according to lunar and solar phases. Similarly, medical practices often integrated astrological insights to determine the best times for surgery or treatments based on patients' birth charts. Medical practitioners consulted astrological charts to diagnose ailments, reflecting a broader cultural consensus that health was influenced by celestial forces. The connection between personal well-being and celestial cycles enhanced astrology's status as a vital aspect of life, frequently discussed in homes and public gathering places. This belief system provided individuals with a sense of agency amid adversity, as answering the star's call often felt like taking control of one's destiny. Political dynamics were also influenced by astrological beliefs, with rulers and leaders often hiring court astrologers to guide decision-making. Major events, including wars, marriages, and proclamations, were frequently timed to align with auspicious celestial alignments. This practice underscored the significance of astrological knowledge as a tool for power, where leaders projected authority through careful calculation of astrological phenomena. Kings and nobility often used celestial events to legitimize their reigns, holding ceremonies during significant astrological alignments to invoke divine favor. Given the prevailing belief in the interconnectedness of the cosmos and life on Earth, astrology offered a unifying framework for understanding destiny, demonstrating how deeply ingrained notions could influence myriad aspects of medieval life. The tapestry of superstitions and beliefs that characterized the Middle Ages offers a rich lens through which to understand the complexities of human thought and societal structure during this period. The interrelation of magic and religion allowed for an understanding of the world that transcended the dichotomy between the ordinary and the supernatural. Communities were bound together in shared fears, hopes, and rituals aimed at navigating an unpredictable reality. The convergence of beliefs in witches, demons, and fairies provided individuals with a framework for interpreting personal hardships, while amplifying the coping mechanisms at their disposal. The legacy of these beliefs, echoing through the centuries, reveals an enduring human need to understand and confront the uncertainties of life, whether through folklore, magic, or religion. Astrology also played a pivotal role in shaping everyday lives, intertwining celestial influences with earthly concerns, and promoting a worldview where personal and cosmic domains were irrevocably linked. The ways people sought harmony in their lives reflected not merely a reliance on superstition, but a genuine quest for meaning in a world fraught with calamity. As societies evolved and embraced the Renaissance, many of these beliefs began to wane, supplanted by emerging scientific rationalism. However, the fascination with the unseen forces that shape existence remains a part of human culture, reminding us of the potential for magic within the mundane and the infinite questions that still linger about our place in the cosmos. The legacies of these medieval superstitions echo through the ages, proving that even in a technologically driven society, the quest for meaning, interpretation, and understanding of the unseen continues to thrive. The medieval period, spanning roughly from the 5th to the late 15th century, was characterized by significant developments in warfare and siege tactics. This era witnessed the rise of feudal societies, the establishment of powerful kingdoms, and the emergence of complex military strategies that would shape Europe for centuries to come. Military conflicts during this time were often brutal and marked by a wide array of weapons and tactics. Knights in shining armour, foot soldiers, archers, and siege engines all played vital roles in shaping the outcome of battles. This script will explore how battles were fought, the tools of war utilised, the harsh realities of sieges, and highlight some of the most famous battles that have significantly impacted history. In the medieval period, battles were frequently fought in open fields, where armies faced off against each other in direct combat. The engagement of troop formations and battlefield strategies was critical to the success of military campaigns, with commanders devising intricate plans to outmaneuver their opponents. Knights, the elite warriors of their time, were heavily armoured and rode on horseback, often leading the charge into battle. Their primary weaponry included the sword, lance, and later the crossbow, each of which was designed to maximise their effectiveness in both mounted and dismounted combat. The role of infantry in these battles was indispensable, as foot soldiers made up a larger segment of the army compared to the nobility. These soldiers were armed with various weapons, such as long spears, halberds, and glaives, which allowed them to engage in close quarters combat effectively. Many infantry units formed tightly packed formations that enabled them to stand against the charges of heavily armoured cavalry. One of the most iconic infantry formations to arise during the later medieval period was that of the pikemen, who, utilising pikes, specialised in countering cavalry charges. Their long reach could create a formidable barrier, protecting the infantry from the initial impact of enemy horsemen. Archers also played a significant role in the medieval battlefield as skilled marksmen capable of inflicting damage from a distance. The English longbow became one of the most powerful ranged weapons of the era, with archers being able to shoot arrows with great speed and accuracy at enemy formations. The famous battles of Crécy in 1346 and Agincourt in 1415 demonstrated the devastating power of the English longbow against heavily armoured knights and infantry. The ability of skilled archers to cause chaos and disrupt enemy formations before the onset of close combat added a new layer to battle tactics and strategies. As warfare evolved, the introduction of gunpowder changed the medieval battlefield dramatically. Early forms of cannon and firearms began to make their appearance, leading to a gradual transition from traditional medieval weapons to artillery-based warfare. The rise of siege engines such as trebuchets and cannons signalled a shift towards tactics designed to breach fortified walls, leading to drastic changes in how battles were conducted. Commanders began utilising a mix of their forces in innovative ways, adapting to technological advancements while strategising based on the strengths and weaknesses of their troops, which created a more dynamic and multifaceted approach to warfare. Beyond weaponry and troop formations, the psychological aspects of battle were equally important. Armies would deploy tactics such as feigned retreats to lure opponents into traps, using cunning and deception as tools of warfare. The morale of troops could turn the tide of battle. A highly disciplined and well-equipped army could intimidate adversaries and cause disarray within their ranks. Additionally, the terrain of the battlefield greatly influenced battle conduct. Commanders adept at leveraging natural features like rivers, hills and forests could gain strategic advantages over their enemies. This integration of cavalry, infantry and ranged combat led to increasingly complex engagements, showcasing the evolving nature of medieval warfare throughout the centuries. The shift from exclusively noble-led armies to more organised, professionally trained military structures began increasingly during the late medieval period. This development laid the groundwork for permanent armies that would eventually emerge in the Renaissance and into modern military history. The establishment of mercenary companies and the rise of military guilds further diversified the forces available to rulers as they sought to expand their power. By creating professional standing armies, monarchs could maintain greater control over their military capabilities, ultimately influencing the political landscape of Europe. Sieges represented one of the darkest and most brutal aspects of medieval warfare. A siege could last for weeks, months, or even years as armies attempted to capture fortified cities or castles. The defenders of these strongholds typically composed local militia, trained soldiers, and nobility, who knew the tactical significance of maintaining their fortifications. Siege warfare was characterized by an intense psychological battle between the besieger and the besieged. The besieging army would encircle the fortress, cut off supply lines, and attempt to compel surrender through starvation and bombardment, aiming to destabilize the defenders both physically and mentally. Conditions during a siege were often wretched. As rations dwindled, those inside the fortifications faced the agonizing choice between rationing the remaining food and risking desperate attempts to break the siege through sorties. Starvation led to drastic measures as morale waned. As supplies diminished, defenders might resort to cannibalistic practices. The psychological toll of hunger and the threat of violence loomed large, creating a climate of despair. Illness and disease were rampant in the cramped and unsanitary conditions of besieged strongholds. Defenders found themselves battling a relentless enemy outside the walls, and an insidious foe within, as dysentery, plague, and other ailments spread rapidly through the ranks. Siege engines became iconic symbols of medieval warfare, showcasing not only the military technology of the era, but also the gruesome realities of siege operations. Trebuchets, for example, could launch not only stones, but also diseased carcasses over castle walls. This type of biowarfare served dual purposes: to create fear and panic among the defenders, and to spread illness within their ranks. Battering rams, ladders, and siege towers were also employed, leading to fierce struggles as attackers sought to breach fortified defences. When the siege culminated in a concerted assault, chaotic melee combat ensued as attackers rushed over castle walls while defenders fought desperately to maintain their hold. The outcomes of such violent clashes were often horrific, resulting in executions, imprisonment, or mass slaughter for the captured defenders, revealing the merciless nature of medieval warfare. One infamous example of the gruesome realities of a siege is the Siege of Jerusalem in 1099 during the First Crusade. The Crusaders faced a tightly defended city, and when they finally breached the walls, the bloodshed was immense, leading to the slaughter of inhabitants and a brutal reclamation of the city. Such events starkly highlight that sieges were not merely military operations, but also horrific narratives of suffering, fear, and human loss. The unfolding dramas of these accounts tell of civilian casualties, transformative fatalities, and destruction that could annihilate entire communities, serving as a tragic reflection of the fierce rivalry for power and territory in the medieval world. In contrast to the martial heroism often romanticised in medieval literature, the reality of these sieges reveals that conflict exacted an untold toll on both combatants and civilians. Innocent lives were shattered, and the landscapes of towns and cities were irrevocably scarred. These high-stakes confrontations often transformed proud cities into ruins, forever altering the lifeways and cultures of those who inhabited them. Battles and sieges were not isolated incidents, but part of evolving narratives that influenced the societal constructs of loyalty, power, and community. As warfare intensified, so did the trauma and impacts of siege warfare, which would resonate through generations, forging collective memories in the fabric of the affected societies. Several pivotal battles throughout the medieval period stand out, shaping the geopolitical landscape of Europe and the course of human events. The Battle of Hastings in 1066 is perhaps the most famous of these military engagements. Fought between the Norman French army led by William the Conqueror and the English army commanded by King Harold II, this confrontation marked a dramatic turning point in English history. The Norman victory heralded the end of Anglo-Saxon rule and the beginning of a profound transformation in English governance, culture, language, and societal structure. William's claim to the English throne would lead to centuries of Norman influence, reshaping the relationships between nobles and their vassals within the feudal system, leading eventually to centralisation of power in the monarchy. The Battle of Agincourt in 1415, fought during the 100 Years' War between England and France, also left an indelible mark on the annals of military history. Here, the English, significantly outnumbered, demonstrated how innovative tactical manoeuvres and superior marksmanship could turn the tide of battle. English longbowmen, positioned behind defensive stakes, launched a barrage of arrows that wreaked havoc on the advancing French knights, who found themselves drawn into a melee in the narrow fields where mobility was severely restricted. The victory established English dominance over the French and reinforced the reputation of the English longbow as a devastating weapon, a lesson that would inspire military strategists for generations. The Siege of Antioch during the First Crusade is another critical engagement, characterised by a long and arduous struggle to capture this fortified city from Muslim forces in 1098. The Crusaders faced incredible obstacles, both in terms of military might and logistical challenges due to supply shortages and infighting among their ranks. After a protracted siege, the Crusaders ultimately managed to take Antioch, marking a vital success for the Christian forces in their campaign. However, the psychological toll on both besiegers and defenders bore witness to the brutal realities of warfare, and the siege's bloody aftermath foreshadowed the ongoing struggle and conflict between Christian and Muslim forces in the region. Additionally, the Battle of Kosovo in 1389 serves as a significant historical event that highlights the complex struggles of identity, faith, and warfare. Fought between the Serbian Empire and the Ottoman Empire, the battle became a symbol of national pride for Serbs, even in the face of defeat. Although the Ottomans won, the battle engendered a sense of unity among Serb forces, leading to the enduring legacy of resistance against Ottoman rule. The consequences of the battle would echo through centuries as the Ottoman Empire expanded further into Europe, creating a lasting impact on the political and cultural dynamics of the Balkans. The medieval period, characterised by evolving strategies, devastating sieges, and battles that reshaped nations and cultures, dramatically transformed the landscape of military history. Understanding the complexities of medieval warfare requires examining diverse aspects, from the troops and their weaponry to the gruesome realities of life under siege. Each conflict weaves a rich tapestry of human experience that illustrates the lengths individuals and societies would go to secure power, territory, and survival. The lessons learned from these battles, coupled with innovations in military tactics and technology, continue to resonate through history, significantly influencing the future of warfare. As we reflect on the arc of history, the stories of medieval warfare reveal not merely tales of combat, but also enduring themes of ambition, struggle, loss, and resilience. The interplay of political forces, military developments, and the harsh realities of life in conflict elucidates the relentless human pursuit of dominance and security that transcends time. Understanding this intricate evolution of warfare during the medieval period not only enriches our comprehension of the past, but also deepens our awareness of the underlying human dynamics that continue to shape confrontations and legitimization of power in our modern world. Through the prism of historical examination, we glimpse the way forward as we consider how the legacies of these battles and their profound impacts continue to echo in today's geopolitical and social landscapes. Medieval villages, often romanticized through literature and film, were dynamic centers of life in the Middle Ages. These agricultural communities were typically found in Europe between the 5th and 15th centuries, and they served as the backbone of the feudal system. While we tend to envision quaint cottages nestled among lush fields, the truth about these villages is far more complex. They were carefully structured societies with designated roles and expectations, and they contributed significantly to the overarching tapestry of medieval life. Understanding how these villages were organised, governed, and sustained sheds light on the socio-economic dynamics of the Middle Ages. One of the most distinctive features of medieval villages was their hierarchical structure, which often mirrored the feudal system. At the top of this hierarchy was the lord or landowner, who controlled the land and granted parcels to peasants in exchange for labour, goods, and a share of the crop. Below the lord were the freeholders, who owned their land and had more freedom than the serfs, who were bound to the land and could not leave without the permission of their lord. The village itself was typically arranged around a central feature, such as a church or a marketplace, which served as a gathering place for community activities. Houses were modest and constructed from locally available materials. Most villagers lived in single-room, thatched-roof cottages that housed families, livestock and storerooms. The daily life of villagers revolved around the agricultural calendar, with planting and harvest seasons dictating the rhythm of work and leisure. These communities were largely self-sufficient. While they depended on the land for their sustenance, the exchange of goods and services with neighbouring villages enriched their lives. Villagers grew crops like wheat, barley and oats, and tended livestock such as sheep, pigs and chickens. Seasonal festivals marked important agricultural milestones and served as occasions for socialising and celebrating. Meanwhile, the unwavering rhythm of life was often punctuated by the church calendar, with religious holidays integrating faith into every facet of existence. However, life in a medieval village was not without its challenges. The governance of medieval villages was primarily decentralised, with the local lord holding the most authority. Generally, the lord would delegate day-to-day management to a steward or bailiff, who was responsible for overseeing agricultural production and settling disputes among villagers. Village meetings were commonly held to discuss community matters, and decisions about local governance were often made collectively. The village assembly, or tithing, allowed villagers to voice their concerns, propose initiatives, and hold each other accountable. However, even with this semblance of democracy, the ultimate power resided with the lord, who retained the right to override village decisions and impose taxation. Land tenure was a crucial structural element of medieval villages. Most villagers rented their land from the lord, who received a portion of the crop in exchange for protection and rights to use the land. This arrangement reinforced the lord-vassal relationship characteristic of the feudal system, where loyalty was expected in return for protection. In cases where the land was not owned but rather inhabited, the concept of common land became essential. Common pastures and woodlands enabled communities to gather resources collaboratively, ensuring no villager would go without the necessities of life. This collective ownership fostered a sense of solidarity among villagers, though it could also lead to disputes over land usage. The centrality of the church in village governance and community life cannot be understated. Villagers often looked to their local priest for guidance, both spiritual and practical. The church played a vital role in adjudicating disputes, educating children, and providing support during times of crisis. Participation in church activities, such as mass and special ceremonies, deepened the bonds of community and helped establish collective identity. Villagers would gather to celebrate important religious occasions, births, marriages, and deaths, adding a layer of social structure to everyday life. The church calendar, with its various feast days and holy observances, marked the passage of time and influenced agricultural practices, creating a tapestry of village life intricately intertwined with faith. The growth of towns and increased trade during the later medieval period led to the establishment of guilds, which were pivotal in regulating craftsmanship and commerce. These organisations allowed craftsmen and merchants to band together, setting standards for quality and equitable conduct among their members. By the late medieval period, the craftsmanship of blacksmiths, weavers, bakers, and carpenters became recognised as essential components of village life, fostering economic development and stability. Alongside agricultural practices, crafts allowed villagers to diversify their skills, creating a more robust local economy that balanced agrarian and artisan labour. In a typical village, craftsmen produced goods needed within the community, but they also played crucial roles in trade dynamics with adjacent settlements. For instance, a blacksmith provided necessary tools for farming and also created wares that could be sold in markets beyond the village. The presence of guilds allowed craftsmen to gain apprentices, ensuring the transmission of knowledge and skill across generations. An apprentice would typically begin training at a young age, working under a master craftsman until they honed their trade, ultimately gaining entry into the guild as a journeyman once they had met established criteria. Ultimately, guilds served not just to protect craftsmen's interests, but also to maintain quality standards and bolster community ties. Moreover, guilds played critical roles in ensuring a fair marketplace. Various rules governed pricing standards, and permissible conduct among traders, which cultivated competition but also prevented dishonest practices. Often these guilds would establish local fairs or markets, where villagers could trade their surplus goods for items they could not produce themselves. This interdependence reinforced community ties and enhanced economic resilience, allowing for a more diversified local economy. Taxation levied by local lords often helped fund these ventures, as fairs provided a direct line of revenue. However, the relationships between guilds and the broader community were not always harmonious. Disputes occasionally arose between guild members and those outside the group, particularly from unregulated craftsmen who undermined quality or pricing standards. These challenges often illustrated the tension in the transition from a largely agrarian society to one beginning to embrace more complex economic structures. Nonetheless, the emergence of guilds represented a significant shift in the socio-economic landscape of medieval villages, transforming how they operated and interacted both internally and with the outside world. Fairs and festivals were integral to the cultural and economic life of medieval villages. These events served multiple purposes. They were an opportunity for villagers to sell produce and crafts, trade goods, and socialise beyond the confines of their immediate community. Local fairs often coincided with religious holidays or seasonal harvests, creating a festive atmosphere where people from neighbouring villages and towns gathered. Merchants and traders would travel to these fairs, bringing a variety of goods and introducing fresh ideas and products, thus enriching the cultural tapestry of the village. Beyond commerce, fairs and festivals provided much-needed respite from the rigours of agricultural life. Medieval villages were often consumed by the demands of farming. The sowing, tending and harvesting of crops dictated their daily schedules. Festivals allowed them to celebrate their hard work, offering a chance for communal merriment and relaxation. Activities such as music, dancing, juggling and various games were common, fostering a sense of community spirit and shared identity. these events often included feasting on seasonal foods, enhancing not only the social but also the culinary aspects of village life. Fairs also played a crucial role in facilitating cultural exchanges. Temporary markets were at the crossroads of local traditions and external influences, allowing for the mixing of diverse customs, languages and crafts. Villagers would encounter new products, ideas, and technologies that could enhance their lives or spawn innovative developments within their communities. For example, the introduction of new agricultural tools or techniques could significantly improve farming efficiency, benefiting the entire village's output. Additionally, fairs often heralded the arrival of itinerant performers, storytellers and entertainers, further enriching the cultural life of the village. However, fairs and festivals also had economic implications that extended beyond immediate transactions. They played a key role in strengthening community relationships and furthering trade networks. By providing a platform for bartering and commerce, they helped establish trust and reciprocity among villagers and traders alike. Ultimately, fairs and festivals encapsulated the very essence of medieval village life, representing a vibrant blend of agrarian activity, cultural appreciation, communal bonding, and economic exchange. The significance of these events underscores the complexity of life in medieval villages, painting a picture of communities that were not merely surviving but thriving through shared traditions and interactions. In summary, the truth about medieval villages reveals a nuanced portrait of medieval life that contradicts many modern assumptions. These communities were intricately structured and functioned under a variety of governance systems, cooperative agricultural practices, and centralised church authority. The role of guilds and craftsmen highlighted the evolution of economic relationships, allowing for skill development and community prosperity. Fairs and festivals provided necessary social outlets and economic opportunities, ensuring that life in medieval villages was as rich and vibrant as it was challenging. By understanding the complexities of medieval villages, we can appreciate the resilience and ingenuity of those who navigated the constraints of their time. The lessons learned from these communities remain relevant, emphasizing the importance of strong local economies, community connections, and shared rituals in fostering a cohesive and supportive society. The legacy of medieval village life endures, reminding us that while times may change, the essential human experiences of governance, trade, and community remain central to our existence. The medieval period, often romanticised and envisioned through a lens of chivalry and grandeur, had its own unique take on fashion and personal hygiene. Spanning from the 5th to the late 15th century, medieval society was marked by a stark contrast in styles and practices across social classes, regions, and even time periods. This script delves into the intricacies of medieval fashion, focusing on what people actually wore and how they crafted these garments, while also exploring the often misunderstood aspects of cleanliness in those times. The world of medieval hygiene was nuanced, with practices that challenge modern perceptions of filthiness. Finally, the use of perfumes and flowers as a means to mask natural odours reveals a fascinating aspect of daily life that intertwines with fashion, creating a rich tapestry of historical culture. In the medieval era, clothing was not merely a matter of vanity, but rather a statement of one's social status, occupation, and regional identity. For the upper echelons of society, garments were often made from luxurious fabrics such as silk and fine wool adorned with intricate embroidery, fur trims, and various vibrant dyes. Nobility wore long flowing gowns and elaborate tunics paired with cloaks, their elegance often accented by accessories like jewelled belts, brooches and headdresses. Men donned tights or breeches underneath their tunics, coupled with knee-length coats and pointed shoes, exemplifying both style and a form of status. Artisans and tradespeople, on the other hand, typically wore simpler garments, crafted from cheaper wool or linen, fashioned into practical styles suitable for daily labour. Making clothes in the medieval period was a labour-intensive process encompassing several stages. Sheep herding, shearing, spinning, and weaving were fundamental steps in producing woolen textiles. Women often undertook the role of spinners, using drop spindles to transform raw wool into yarn, which was then woven into fabric on looms. The dyeing process involved natural substances such as plants, berries, and minerals, leading to a palette of vibrant colours that signified the wearer's social standing. The construction of garments required skill. Seams were hand-stitched, and decorative techniques such as embroidery were employed to enhance the overall aesthetic of the clothing. Under-tailoring indicated not only the artisan's skill, but also reflected the pride and care taken in the garment's creation. Beyond aesthetics, fashion in the medieval world was heavily influenced by practicality and the conditions of life at that time. The elaborate layers worn by the upper classes served not only to display wealth, but also to keep warmth during the colder months, while the simpler clothing of the lower classes was designed for ease of movement. The evolution of fashion during this period also displayed regional and cultural differences. For instance, garments in warmer areas were often looser and lighter, whereas those in colder regions needed heavier fabrics with more layers. Tailors and seamstresses, often part of guild systems in cities, played a crucial role in innovating clothing designs, thus fueling a constant evolution of fashion that catered to both functionality and status. As the medieval period progressed, fashion began to reflect more individual expression, leading to varying styles across Europe. By the late Middle Ages, the rise of cities and trade began to forge a burgeoning middle class, which brought about a new demand for quality and style in clothing. This era also saw the advent of the fitted style, with a greater emphasis on tailoring, leading toward the clothing silhouettes that would precede the Renaissance. Intriguingly, alongside the trends in outer garments, there came an increased realization of the need for undergarments, with various forms serving both comfort and support. The perception of medieval hygiene is often mired in misconceptions and sensationalized notions of filth. It is a common myth that medieval people were oblivious to cleanliness and wallowed in unsanitary conditions. In reality, while the infrastructure for modern sanitation was lacking, medieval society had its own practices and standards of cleanliness that reflect an awareness of hygiene. Bathing, for example, was more common than one might expect, especially in urban centres. Public bathhouses were prevalent during the early medieval period, and while their popularity waned in some parts during the later Middle Ages due to fears of disease, the act of washing was still practiced at home. Medieval hygiene was multifaceted. People bathed in rivers, lakes, or communal bathhouses, often believing that cleanliness was linked more to health than to mere decorum. Historical accounts indicate that many individuals bathed their bodies on a weekly basis. However, the bathing practices varied by region and class. While nobles had access to private baths and running water, peasants often made do with whatever resources were available to them. Their limited access to water meant that many would resort to methods such as washing specific parts of the body or using linen cloths to cleanse themselves. The idea of personal cleanliness was tied not only to physical health, but also to social standing, wherein cleanliness often indicated prestige. Further complicating the narrative of medieval hygiene was the understanding and application of medical knowledge at the time. Physicians and healers, influenced by Galenic principles of humours, advocated for a balance between cleanliness and bodily balance. This meant that thorough body washing could be seen as harmful in certain contexts, thus moderation was encouraged. Additionally, personal grooming, such as combing hair and cleaning teeth, was practiced, signalling an awareness of hygiene that contradicts the stereotype of the filthy medieval. The lack of convenience in our modern understanding of hygiene should not overshadow the innovative ways in which medieval individuals approached cleanliness with the materials and knowledge they possessed. Nevertheless, it is essential to recognise that hygiene standards were not uniform across all of medieval society. Urban life could lead to overcrowding in houses and narrow streets, contributing to unsanitary conditions. The accumulation of waste in towns often led to foul odours, contributing to the perception of the medieval filthy lifestyle. Fleeing from the realities of urban stench, some city dwellers sought refuge in rural areas for fresh air and perceived cleanliness. For instance, court life often presented a sanitised version of hygiene practices, where royal families employed a retinue of servants to ensure cleanliness and maintain the pristine environment necessary for noble life. Thus, while there were certainly challenges related to cleanliness during medieval times, equating the entire period with rampant filth oversimplifies a complex reality. In the medieval world, the concept of odour and fragrance played an essential role in both personal and social contexts, often serving as a countermeasure against the unpleasant smells resulting from inadequate bathing practices and waste management. Fragrance was not a luxury simply, but rather a necessity that people relied upon to cope with their environment. The use of natural perfumes, essential oils and floral arrangements permeated social settings, especially among the higher classes, where they served as markers of wealth and status. Gardens filled with aromatic herbs and flowers, not only beautifying spaces, served a practical purpose, with the blooms utilised to create perfumes, scented waters and oils. Herbs such as rosemary, lavender and mint were commonly grown for their fragrant properties, and their use could be traced back to ancient practices. Apothecaries and herbalists developed a thriving industry around scents, creating products designed to mask body odour as well as unpleasant smells from the surrounding environment. The popularity of scented oils and balms grew during this period, and the infusion of rosewater and other floral extracts into daily rituals became a standard practice among the nobility. Fragrances were incorporated not only into personal grooming, but also into linens and clothing as a way to impart a lingering scent, thus enhancing an individual's social standing. The concept of using sweet-smelling plants and concoctions as a buffer against body odour was further emphasised in the face of societal expectations surrounding appearance and cleanliness. Courtly behaviour dictated certain standards, and despite the challenges of maintaining true cleanliness, the presence of a pleasant scent communicated effort and care in personal grooming. Interestingly, the use of flowers also had a ceremonial function, often linked to religious or seasonal celebrations, creating associations between fragrance and cultural identity. Such practices highlight a society seeking to cultivate an atmosphere of elegance and propriety, attempting to elevate the human experience through the infusion of scent into daily life. The art of perfumery during the medieval period laid the foundation for the later development of modern fragrance. As scents were crafted from a blend of flowers, spices and herbs, the evolving understanding of aroma's effects on mood and perception began to take hold. The demand for scented products also paved the way for trade routes focused on the import and export of rare and desired fragrances, further intertwining the dynamics of economics and social status. In this context, the use of fragrances and flowers transcended mere masking of odours, evolving into a blossoming cultural phenomenon that married fashion, hygiene, and societal norms in the complex tapestry of medieval life.